What if the first thing you experience after death is not darkness, but recognition? For centuries, people have asked the same haunting question. When our final breath leaves the body, when our eyes close for the last time in this world, what truly happens in that very first moment? And even more intriguing, who is the first spirit that comes to receive you? Many imagine a sudden void. Others picture judgment, fear, or loneliness. But countless spiritual accounts suggest something far more profound, something filled with intelligence, compassion, and an order most people never imagined existed. Because death, contrary to what many fear, is not an end. It is a transition, a passage, and like every passage, someone is usually waiting on the other side. If you are drawn to understanding the mysteries of the soul and what awaits beyond the physical world, subscribe now and walk with us on this journey of discovery. Every week we explore questions that humanity has asked for generations, questions about life, the spirit, and what lies beyond the veil. Now imagine this moment: a hospital room, a quiet bedroom, perhaps an accident on a road. Your body is there, surrounded by the physical world you have always known, but something subtle begins to change. The separation does not usually happen violently. In many cases, it is delicate, gradual, almost like waking from a deep sleep. Many spiritual traditions describe a subtle energetic connection between the spirit and the body, sometimes referred to as a spiritual cord. As death approaches, that connection slowly releases, thread by thread, like roots gently loosening from the soil. For some people, this process is quick and peaceful, like a leaf carried away by a soft breeze. For others, especially those deeply attached to their physical life, the transition may take longer. They may feel a light heaviness, a warm sensation, or an unexpected calm. Some describe it as drifting, others say it feels like floating, and then something remarkable happens. They begin to perceive the world differently. A man named Michael Carter once described what happened when he clinically died during heart surgery for several minutes. He later recalled looking down and seeing doctors moving around his body. At first, he thought he was dreaming. He tried to speak. No one answered. He tried to touch someone's shoulder. His hand passed through them. Confusion is common during this stage. The newly separated spirit may look at their own body, see loved ones crying nearby, and struggle to understand what is happening. Why can't they hear me? Why can't anyone see me? This moment of awareness can be disorienting, but something else begins to happen almost immediately. The spiritual world, which has always existed just beyond human perception, slowly becomes clearer. Many describe the sensation of warmth surrounding them, not a physical warmth, but something emotional, comforting, almost like an embrace made of light. And then, often without warning, exhaustion sets in. The spirit may drift into a deep rest, almost like sleep, as if the soul itself is adjusting to a new reality. A woman named Emily Dawson, who had a near-death experience after a car accident, later described this stage in a way that stunned the doctors who interviewed her. She said she felt an overwhelming peace. Not excitement, not fear, just peace. And as that peace surrounded her, she sensed that someone was nearby, not visible yet, but present, watching gently, patiently, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Because the spiritual world does not force awakening. It respects the rhythm of the soul. Every transition is unique. Every awakening happens in its own time. And when the spirit is ready to truly understand what has happened, that is when the first encounter usually takes place. But who appears first is something that surprises most people. It is not always who we expect. Sometimes it is someone who has followed our life from the very beginning, a presence that has been there through every silent struggle, every difficult decision, every moment when we felt alone, even when we did not realize it. In many cases, the first spirit waiting on the other side is someone who has never truly left our side at all, and their role in our lives is far greater than most people ever realize. When the spirit finally awakens fully after death, the first sensation many describe is not fear, it is familiarity. A presence begins to emerge through the soft glow of the spiritual environment, not suddenly or dramatically, but gently, as if it had been standing there all along, waiting patiently for the soul to recognize it. And in many cases, the first spirit to approach is not a stranger from another world. It is a guide, a spiritual mentor, a consciousness that has accompanied the person through much of their life on earth. Most people go through their entire existence unaware that they are being quietly assisted. Through moments of doubt, unexpected protection, sudden insights, or even strange coincidences that seem too precise to be random, there is often an invisible intelligence offering guidance behind the scenes. This guide does not interfere with human freedom. It does not control decisions or prevent every mistake. The purpose of this presence is not to remove challenges, but to help the soul grow through them. And when the physical journey finally ends, this same presence is often the first one the newly awakened spirit sees. There is a reason for that. The first moments after death can be confusing. The soul is adjusting to a reality that feels both new and strangely familiar. Seeing someone who has always been connected to them creates a sense of calm, stability, and trust. A man named Robert Mitchell experienced something remarkable after suffering cardiac arrest for several minutes. When he later described what he saw, his words left the medical staff stunned. He said that after feeling himself leave the body, he drifted through what he described as a soft gray space. There was no pain, no urgency, no chaos, just silence. Then gradually a figure began to appear. Not glowing dramatically, not surrounded by thunder or celestial music, but standing quietly with an expression that felt deeply reassuring. Robert said the man looked ordinary, calm, gentle. But the moment he saw him, something inside his spirit recognized the presence instantly, not from memory of this life, but from something deeper. The figure smiled and said words Robert never forgot. "You took longer than expected, but you did well." There was no judgment in the voice, no accusation, only understanding. Many spiritual traditions describe mentors appearing in ways that will not frighten the newly awakened soul. Sometimes they appear as a compassionate elder, sometimes as someone who resembles a familiar figure. Occasionally they may even appear as a doctor or caregiver, especially if the person passed away in a hospital. The purpose is simple: to reassure, to stabilize, to help the spirit understand that it has not been abandoned. This guide often remains silent at first, allowing the person to observe and slowly process what has happened. Questions may arise naturally. Am I dead? Is this real? Where am I? The answers are not always given immediately in words. Sometimes the mentor simply walks beside the spirit, allowing them to gradually accept the reality of the transition. And as the spirit becomes calmer, something even more surprising may happen. Other presences begin to appear. Not distant figures or unfamiliar entities, but souls connected through deep bonds of affection. People whose absence once caused grief during life may suddenly appear again with an unmistakable warmth. A mother, a brother, a spouse, a lifelong friend. These reunions are often described as overwhelming moments of recognition, not recognition through the eyes, but through the heart of the spirit. One woman, Sarah Whitman, who briefly died during complications in childbirth, described seeing her grandfather approach her. He had passed away when she was a child. At first, she did not see his face clearly, but she felt something unmistakable, a feeling she remembered from her earliest years: safety. She said she knew it was him before she even saw his face. When he finally came closer, she began to cry. Not from sadness, but from the realization that the bond between them had never been broken. Moments like these reveal something profound about existence. Love does not end when the body does. Connections built through genuine affection continue to exist beyond the physical world. And those connections often become the bridge that helps the newly departed soul cross the threshold between two realities. But not every spirit awakens immediately into such reunions. For many souls, the transition requires a period of care, recovery, and spiritual restoration, because leaving the physical body does not instantly erase the emotional and energetic imprints carried from life. And that is why another group of spirits plays a very important role in the moments after death. They are not family. They are not personal guides. Yet their mission may be one of the most compassionate tasks in the entire spiritual realm. They are the ones who receive those who arrive confused, exhausted, or deeply wounded by their experiences on Earth. And the places where they work resemble something very familiar to the human mind. Not a heaven of clouds and harps, but something much more organized, structured, and astonishingly real. Places of healing, places where the soul can finally rest, places prepared long before we ever realize we might need them. Not every spirit awakens immediately surrounded by familiar faces. For many souls, The first destination after death is a place designed for recovery, because leaving the body does not instantly erase the emotional weight of a lifetime. Pain, confusion, fear, attachment, and even physical sensations can still linger within the spirit for some time. And that is where another group of beings enters the picture. They are often described as spiritual caregivers, helpers, or healing spirits. Their role is not to judge, interrogate, or punish, but to assist those who have just crossed the boundary between the physical and the spiritual world. These spirits work in places that many people have described with striking similarity, even when they come from completely different cultures and belief systems. They describe environments that resemble hospitals, recovery centers, or sanctuaries, large halls filled with soft light. Rooms where newly arrived souls are gently placed into states of deep rest, spaces that feel quiet, organized, and filled with a sense of calm purpose. One man named Daniel Foster experienced this after being revived following a severe accident. He described leaving his body and drifting through a dim space before being approached by two figures who appeared calm and focused, almost like nurses or medical professionals. They did not speak much. Instead, they guided him with gestures and reassuring expressions. Soon he found himself in what he described as a vast building filled with gentle light. There were rows of resting areas, almost like beds, where other spirits seemed to be sleeping peacefully. He noticed that some of them looked exhausted, while others appeared calm and serene. He later said something that deeply moved the researchers who interviewed him. They weren't treating us like patients. They were treating us like travelers who had been on a very long journey. The idea that the spiritual world contains organized places of healing may seem surprising to many people. But according to countless testimonies from near-death experiences and spiritual literature, these environments serve an essential purpose. The soul, after all, carries impressions from life. Someone who endured a long illness may still feel the emotional exhaustion of that struggle. Someone who experienced trauma, fear, or confusion in their final moments may awaken disoriented. These spiritual centers exist to help restore balance. The newly arrived spirit may rest for a period that feels like hours, days, or sometimes longer, depending on their condition. During this time, spiritual caregivers assist in stabilizing the person's energetic state, helping the soul release the heavy impressions left behind by physical life. Many describe feeling waves of comfort flowing through them. Others recall a sensation like being surrounded by warmth or gentle currents of energy. The purpose is always the same: to prepare the spirit to understand its new reality. But there is another side to this story that few people speak about. Not every spirit arrives ready to accept help. Some individuals leave the physical world carrying intense emotions, anger, guilt, resentment, or deep attachment to material things. These states of mind can create a kind of fog around the spirit's perception. It is not that help is unavailable. Often help is very close, but the person cannot perceive it. A man named Thomas Reed lived a life driven almost entirely by wealth and power. He accumulated enormous success in business, but had very little connection to compassion or spiritual reflection. When he died unexpectedly, his transition was very different from the peaceful experiences others described. Instead of light or welcoming figures, he found himself in a dark, confusing environment that felt strangely empty. He tried to call out. No one answered. He walked through what seemed like endless shadows, convinced he had been abandoned. What Thomas did not realize was that his own emotional state was preventing him from seeing the help that was already near him. Spiritual traditions often explain this phenomenon as vibrational alignment. The condition of the mind shapes what the spirit is able to perceive. If a person carries clarity, humility, and openness, they naturally connect with benevolent presences. But if someone leaves the physical world trapped in bitterness or denial, their awareness may temporarily lock them into a narrow and painful perception of reality. Yet even in these cases, abandonment is never the final outcome, because something extraordinary can happen from the physical world that reaches far beyond what most people imagine. A simple act, performed by someone still alive, can create a bridge powerful enough to reach even the most lost soul. A prayer, a sincere thought of love, a moment of compassion directed towards someone who has already passed. These quiet gestures may seem small on earth, but in the spiritual dimension, they shine like signals of light in the darkness. A prayer may look simple to the human eye, just a few words whispered in silence, a moment of reflection. a quiet thought directed towards someone who is no longer physically present. But in the spiritual dimension, that moment can become something extraordinary. Many traditions describe prayer as a kind of signal, a vibration of intention and compassion that travels far beyond the physical world. It does not depend on distance, language, or ritual. What gives it power is sincerity. When someone on earth remembers a loved one with genuine love and asks for their well-being, that emotional energy radiates outward like light in darkness, and sometimes that light reaches a soul that is lost. There are countless accounts of spirits who remained confused after death, wandering through states of uncertainty, until a simple prayer from someone they loved created the opening they needed to receive help. One story, often shared among spiritual researchers, tells of a man named Edward Collins. Edward had lived a difficult life. He was intelligent and ambitious, but his choices had often been driven by greed and pride. Over time, he pushed away most of the people who cared about him. When he died suddenly from a stroke, his spirit awakened in a strange and dim environment. There was no clear landscape, no sky, just a vague sense of space and an overwhelming feeling of isolation. Edward tried to move forward, but the environment around him felt heavy, almost like walking through thick fog. He called for help again and again, but his voice seemed to dissolve into silence. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. Time behaved differently there. Eventually he collapsed into despair, convinced that he had been forgotten by everyone he had ever known. But on Earth, something small was happening. His granddaughter, Lily, only 8 years old, had been told that her grandfather had passed away. She did not understand death fully, but she remembered him reading stories to her when she was younger. That night, before going to sleep, she whispered a simple prayer. "Please take care of my grandpa wherever he is." Nothing dramatic happened in her bedroom, but in the spiritual realm something shifted. Edward later described seeing a faint light appear in the distance, a soft glow cutting through the fog that had surrounded him. At first he thought it was imagination, but the light slowly grew stronger, and within that light figures began to appear. They approached carefully, almost as if they did not want to startle him. These were spiritual helpers who had been waiting for the right moment to reach him. The prayer had opened the pathway they needed. Edward was eventually guided away from that shadowed state and taken to a place of recovery, where he slowly began to understand the life he had lived and the changes his spirit needed to make. Stories like this reveal something deeply important about the connection between the living and the departed. Death does not erase love. It does not sever compassion. In many ways, those bonds become even more powerful because they are no longer limited by the physical world. Every act of kindness performed during life shapes the environment the soul will encounter after death. Every moment of forgiveness clears part of the path ahead. Every time someone chooses empathy over cruelty, honesty over deception, or generosity over selfishness, something invisible begins to form around the spirit. It is like building a landscape that will one day receive us. This is why many spiritual teachings emphasize that the afterlife is not something that suddenly appears when life ends. It is something we begin creating every day through the way we live, the people we help, the compassion we show, the love we cultivate. All of it becomes part of the spiritual reality we will eventually enter. And when the moment finally arrives, when the body grows quiet and the soul opens its eyes in a new world, the first spirit who comes to meet us may not be a stranger at all. It may be the guide who quietly walked beside us our entire life. It may be a loved one whose affection never faded, or it may be a compassionate helper whose mission is to welcome travelers arriving from the long journey of earth. But one thing appears again and again in the stories of those who have glimpsed that threshold. No sincere soul is ever truly abandoned. Some awaken quickly, some need time, some need help finding their way through confusion. Yet the spiritual universe seems to operate with a patience and mercy that far exceed human expectations. Perhaps the greatest preparation we can make for that moment is surprisingly simple. Live with kindness. Cultivate forgiveness. Offer help when someone is suffering. And never underestimate the power of a sincere prayer. Because one day, when your own journey continues beyond the physical world, those very qualities may be the light that guides you home.